Hello, BookTube. It's that time again. It's time for another aspirant to the crown for the Has Steve Read It tag, which has now gone viral. This was made by Matthew at Mayberry Book Club. And its premise is pretty simple. He looked around his books and thought, well, Steve reads a lot. Matthew, in his original video, I'll link it down below, wonders a little bit sillily if maybe I've read more than anyone in the world. That certainly is not true. But I do read a lot. I read an average of 150 pages an hour for an average of 10 hours every day. That's a lot. That's a lot of books. And that rate can go up if I'm rereading a book or if the book is an obvious trifle. It goes down as well if I'm reading a very abstruse, longer work, something that's meant to be difficult, something that's meant to require a lot of pondering. But one way or another, it's a huge amount of reading. And Matthew wondered if he looked at his books in his own collection, how many of these might Steve not have read? So he picked, I think his original number was 8. The number has gone from 8 to 10, thereabouts. He picked, I think, 8 books, and of his 8 books, 2 were books that I had not read. And he tagged a whole bunch of people, but apparently he need not have bothered, because apparently this is a tag you all want to do. Because I left comments on his video, but I didn't make a tag. I didn't make a video of my own in response. I'm going to do that. I'm going to make a video response to his video. But after that, I've made a video response to every single one of these because they're so good. Quite apart from testing whether or not I have read the lesser known books in your collection, the wonder of this tag is that it's making people talk about the lesser known books in their collections all over the world. These are books that people are holding up and talking about that are never mentioned on BookTube. That is just wonderful. And naturally, since a lot of people have been doing this tag, it's been impossible to avoid noticing who's in the lead. For a while, it was Samuel Darham, who had 3 books that I had not read. And then Hannah of Hannah's Books entered the ring. And she took the prize with 4 books that I hadn't read. And everyone since then has been wondering if they could dethrone her. It hasn't worked. No one has been able to dethrone her. A couple of aspirants have actually emailed her and said, I think I have it in me to dethrone you. And her exact response has been, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like I said, it's always the quiet ones. But today we have the Story Dtechtive. One of those channels, I have mentioned this kind of BookTube channel many times before, where if you just watch the video, let's say in landscape mode on your phone, when I watch his videos, and he's mostly a writing channel, a fantastic writing channel, and has, I might add, one of the most infectious laughs anywhere on YouTube. When you watch his videos in that format, you will mentally estimate a subscriber count of maybe, I think the first time I saw him, I thought 15, 16,000 subscribers. And he's nowhere near that, and I don't know why that is. I don't understand subscribers at all. So I'm going to leave a link to his channel down below. If you're at all interested in writer-tube, author-tube videos, and also then go and subscribe, because his channel is wonderful. But he noticed this tag and decided to try his hand. So let's see what kind of success he has. He picked 10 books instead of 8. And the first one is The Thing from Another World, Climate of Fear, a graphic novel from Dark Horse Comics that is adapted from the John Carpenter adaptation of the Campbell story, The Thing. And he picked it because he helped to ink it. He inks The Thing. So his name is in the credits of The Thing. And it sounds absolutely fascinating. It has a really garish, old-style, pulpy cover. I have never read it. So we start off with a no. I'm not... I mean, Marvel and DC comics, I will read Marvel sometimes because they have a gigantic red-caped thunder god, or at least they used to, before they cut his arm off and made him an alcoholic and then gouged his eye out and then just recently had a third-tier character cut his head off. Don't get me started. But DC has Superman. So, but Dark Horse, hardly ever. I read some of their stuff when they had Conan. But I missed this thing completely, and it sounds really good. And it's fascinating. One of the fascinating things you'll notice when you watch the Story Dtechtive, when you look at his back catalog, is that it's not just that he has great observations about the craft of writing. It's also that he's been there. He's been in the trenches, and we should embrace that. That is absolutely fascinating. The next book is a cheesy mass market paperback called The Messenger by Donald Tyson, and it is a second no. Despite what Robert Jones, he's the story detective, and despite what he says a couple of times in his video, where he says, "Well, I doubt Steve would read this because it's so bad." if you go back to the relevant videos in question when I have guest stars, my friend Sam or Deb, and the question comes up, well, what does Steve read? You will notice that without hesitation, without any prompting from me, they both say, "Oh, Steve will read anything." He goes into the gutter. He'll read any kind of garbage in the world. And that is absolutely true. So just as it was, it has not been a safe assumption for people to assume that if the book is written about something that annoys me or in a style that annoys me, then I won't read it. It's also not a safe assumption to say that just because it's bad, I won't read it. God help us, I read lots of bad stuff. But I have not read The Messenger by Donald Tyson. So that's a second no. Then we go on to another piece of schlock, only this time I have read it. This is the Case of Cabin 13 by Sam McCarver. And as you might be able to tell from the title, it's a murder mystery set on the Titanic. And that's the reason that I read it. I don't know this author. But I grabbed it because I've mentioned on this channel before, I love the story of the Titanic. And I also love, as a subset of that, the ways that it can be captured in fiction. I think I've read a huge number of Titanic-based novels of one kind or another. I find them all fascinating. This one, not so much, but the completist in me certainly had me read it. Then we have another no, and this is Stuff in the Lady's Hatbox by Carlton E. Morse. And the Story Detective tells a fantastic story behind this about old-style radio serials, and Morse was apparently the impresario behind a lot of those, and that this is an actual novelization of one of those. And he asked the question, has Steve ever gone down this route? Has he explored the world of old-time radio pulps? And I have. Not this one. I don't know this one at all. But a lot of the others, he mentions The Saint, The Shadow, The Avenger, Doc Savage. I love those old pulp heroes. Absolutely love them. Probably none more than Doc Savage, but I love them all. So I have explored that world, but not this. So that's fascinating. And it's another example of what I find so fascinating about this tag, is that you learn all sorts of things. If the Story Detective, or Samuel Darm or anybody else were making a normal booktube video, these are the kinds of books they probably wouldn't mention. And so I love it. I love hearing about them, learning about them. Then the next one, oh boy, the next one brought back memories. It's a yes. It's The Husband by Sol Stein, who apparently was a writing teacher of the Story Detective. And as he puts it, this book was written quickly and in anger. And it's a slim little thing. And I did read it in exactly the edition that he held up on camera. And he says, perhaps out of pedagogical loyalty rather than really assessing what's on the page, he says it's a solidly made novel. I don't have that memory at all, but maybe I could reread it. Good luck finding it, though. I don't think I would ever see it again. And the next one is also a yes, and this is The Understudy by the odious, hateful Elia Kazan, who, again, I read the exact same edition that he holds up on camera. And I do recommend the book. The Understudy is actually very, very good. But if you want to do me a favor, especially those of you who maybe don't know your history, just take my word for it. And whenever you use Elia Kazan's name, preface it with the odious, because he warrants it. Believe you me. Then the next one is a classic, an absolute classic. The Story Detective names 2 novels in this entire roster that are classics of American literature and really unrecognized as such. Penguin Classic would, school reading itineraries, booktube mentions. They don't get the mentions that they deserve. They are both American classics, and American classics of a very similar kind of immigrant literature. The first one is What Makes Sammy Run by Bud Schulberg. And it's an incredible book. It's a reading experience, the like of which you've never had before. It owes a little. There are a few echoes of Studs Lonergan, but it's mostly its own thing, its own patois, its own world, and it's just fascinating. I don't even know if there's a current version of it. I did not read the version that the Story Detective held up, But I read a very early version. I read a mass market paperback that was probably 1 year to the left or to the right of the one he held up. And I don't recall seeing this thing in book lists or in bookstores in quite some time, but it's well worth your time to find. And same thing with the next one, Call It Sleep by Henry Roth, who wrote this book, and it sank like a stone, and then an enterprising editor thought to bring it back. It had ardent fans, people who read it and really loved it. And it's also a portrait of a bygone New York. Same thing as What Makes Sammy Run. They're very similar books. In tone, in execution, in incredible energy, they're very similar books. And Call It Sleep is well worth your time to find. It's unfortunate that this author went on to just overindulge himself in writing. It was a private project, but someone bothered to write it. Someone bothered to publish it. The Mercy of a Rude Stream is it's tough going. But Call It Sleep is a classic. It's just brilliant. And it's of course a yes. And then the next one is a relatively new book. It's a relatively contemporary work of nonfiction, Napoleon of Crime by Ben McIntyre, about Adam Worth, who was, by all accounts, one of the models for Arthur Conan Doyle, on which he modeled Professor Moriarty, hence the title. I found the book a little bit laborious. I thought it was dutiful and a little bit uninspired on subjects that should not admit of that. This is a great story, and I didn't catch that at all. This story could be much better told. In fact, I mean, I read it for the same reason that the Story Detective did, because I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. I read everything even adjacent to Sherlock Holmes. I could swear that I remember that somebody else, probably 30 years before this book, also wrote about Adam Worth and did a much better job. I could swear that I remember that it came out as a mass market pulpy paperback, but that it was really good. As those of you who are old enough will remember, some of those original mass market pulpy paperbacks in drugstores were really good. They were tremendous works. Call It Sleep. I read the same edition that the Story Detective held up, a mass market with rounded covers. And you could get that, at a 5 and dime right next to the soda pop stand. So, and yet it's terrific. And I could swear that I read a book about this real life Professor Moriarty long before I read this one. Because I seem to remember reading this and thinking about that book and thinking, oh God, well, you could have told this with a little more energy. But it is a yes. And the next one, I believe, is also a yes. The last one on the list here is Children of the Dark by Alan Gallop, about child labor in Victorian England. Horrifying stories of children used as beasts of burden. No child protection laws, no real conception of what childhood is. They're just viewed as smaller and weaker workers, people who could be exploited mercilessly or sold. And I know that I read this book, but I don't think I read it with this title. I could swear that my title had Children of the Dark in Victorian England, or Victorian England's Children in the Dark, or Victoria's Children in the Dark. I'm guessing that my title was the American edition. And in his video, the Story Detective wonders whether or not the book even had an American edition. I think if it did, that's what I read. I remember being very moved by it, as he seemed to be, but I know that mine had a slight variation on the title. But I'm counting as a yes, because there's no way that I would have forgotten this author's name. There's no way that I would be mistaking this for a different book. And there you go. That is the Robert Jones, the Story Detective. That is his attempt at the Has Steve Read It tag. And there's the bean behind me. And naturally, those of you keeping track at home are wondering whether or not Hannah's East Coast, West Coast thrown gauntlet, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself, turned out to be true. Well, it turned out it did. The Queen still holds her throne, because that, as you may have counted, was 3. So the Story Detective now matches Samuel Durham at 3, but the throne is unthreatened. We are still at 4. 4 out of 8 or 10. Whatever number that you choose, 8, 9, 10, whatever you do, we're only up to 4. No one's hit 5 yet. I know I'm good, but I shouldn't be that good. You're all adventurous readers. Granted, we are using some ground rules here. You can't pick old auto manuals or old computer program guides or whatnot, or something like that, or something that someone had privately printed that you found at the bottom of a basement charity shop or something like that. And also, with a few exceptions, people have been mostly sticking to English. to books in English. That's probably fair. I've read a huge amount in languages that aren't English. I'm willing to give it a try if you are, but it's probably fair to the rest of BookTube to keep all the books in English. But there are no hard and fast rules, none whatsoever. So we still don't have a new winner. The Queen has been on the throne for quite some time. So, but it was still a valiant try, a valiant try. And what fantastic books! Oh, that has been like the absolute signature of this tag all along, is that the books are fantastic, so thought-provoking, so off the beaten track of even BookTube. Even our little corner of BookTube, which is so much closer to the infinite variety of readers in the world. I love it. Absolutely love it. Cannot thank Matthew enough. Cannot thank the rest of you enough. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but we will go on to the next claimant, the next person who tries to snatch the crown. We'll do that probably tomorrow. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.